What's going on, everybody? Kalibus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2023 and the OnePlus Nord N30 5G. Now, as always, if you do end up wanting to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 6.6-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 399, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. With the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, we're getting a slightly larger 6.72-inch display. It is also a 120Hz IPS LCD, and it also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 391, and a 20:9 aspect ratio. So in general, these displays are pretty similar. In fact, when it comes to image quality and display technology, they are actually exactly the same, both being IPS LCDs with pretty nice looking colors. With 120Hz refresh rates, the movement on the screen is going to be a bit faster and smoother than your standard 60Hz displays, so the phones are going to feel a bit more premium to use. And with 1080p resolutions, we're also getting nice sharp images. So if you're doing stuff like watching videos, for example, where the image quality is a bit more important, then with either phone here, you will get a good experience. That being said though, again, the OnePlus Nord N30 5G is a tiny bit larger at again 6.72 inches versus 6.6 with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now, this isn't really the biggest difference ever, but at the same time, if having a slightly larger display is a bit more important to you, the OnePlus will have a slight advantage. But in general, if you're looking for an affordable mid-range phone that has a really nice display for consuming content, either phone here will be a great choice. Now for storage, with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2023, we're getting 256GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and with the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, we're getting 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. Now keep in mind, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, the phone in my hand is factory unlocked, and if you get this phone through a carrier, the storage could be different. Through most carriers, I am expecting it to only be 128GB, but just keep in mind, if you do want 256, then with this phone, it is an option, whereas with the OnePlus, when it comes to storage, 128 is the only option. That being said though, to be fair, 128GB is definitely a decent amount of storage, and for most people, you're probably not going to need more than this. But at the same time, if storage is a bit more important to you and maybe you don't mind getting a phone factory unlocked, between the two, the Moto G Stylus 5G will have an advantage. For security features, both phones have face unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners right here on the power keys, so definitely nice to get both options. But starting with the Moto G Stylus, let's give the fingerprint scanners a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the OnePlus. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no issues at all. And again, remember, they both have face unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now taking a look at the camera setups here, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, up front, we got a real nice looking hole punch design for the selfie camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we get a dual camera setup with the 50 megapixel main camera and an 8 megapixel ultra wide camera that also doubles as a macro camera. With the OnePlus Nord N30, up front, we got pretty much the same design for the selfie camera. This camera is also 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with the 108 megapixel main camera, a 2 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. Now it's kind of interesting here because despite the OnePlus having a triple camera setup and the Motorola having only a dual camera, the Motorola actually has more features, having an ultra wide camera, whereas with the OnePlus, again, despite at least having a macro camera, this phone does not have an ultra wide camera. In fact, with this phone, it's kind of weird to me that the depth sensing camera is separate, because at this point in 2023, we have been seeing more and more phones that have it basically built into the main camera, kind of like most higher end devices. And while it really doesn't make much of a difference, since after all portrait mode works just the same, seeing that the OnePlus has a 108 megapixel main camera, you would think the hardware would be a bit better. But in reality, despite having a really impressive main camera, between the two when it comes to overall photo quality, as you're about to see, there's not really an insane difference. Now another thing I do want to point out here is that when it comes to video, despite both phones having a max recording quality of 1080p in the front cameras, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this phone can actually record 4K videos in the rear, whereas with the OnePlus, it does also max out at 1080p. So in general, despite both phones having pretty good camera setups for what they are, I do think in most ways, the Moto G Stylus 5G is overall a bit better. So if you're really taking lots of photos and the camera in general is a bit more important to you, then I would definitely keep this in mind. Now to give you an idea of what they can do, first, here's some pictures taken with the Moto G Stylus 5G. So overall, definitely for a mid-range phone, I do think the camera quality here is really impressive. And this is really not surprising considering the 4G version of this phone, despite not being nearly as good feature-wise, did actually have really impressive photo quality for what it is, and considering the Moto G Stylus 5G is a bit higher end than that, I'm not surprised to see the photo quality is also significantly better. So in general, despite not being quite as good as something like a Google Pixel phone or a higher end Samsung phone for example, I do think that for what it is, if you're really looking for an affordable mid-range phone, but you also like to take a lot of pictures, and you want to make sure the photo quality is good enough for pretty much anything, I do think in that case, the Moto G Stylus 5G will be a great choice. And then here's some pictures taken with the OnePlus Nord N30 5G. In between the two, when it comes to which one is actually better, the pictures are right here, so I'll let you decide that for yourself. But overall, I feel like they're really around the same level, so if you're taking mostly just regular photos, and you want the photo quality to be really good, but you don't really care about having an ultra-wide camera or recording 4K videos, then honestly, I feel like either phone will be perfectly fine. But again, if you do want an ultra-wide camera and maybe you're recording lots of videos, and you want to record in 4K, then in that case, the Moto G Stylus 5G will have an advantage. Now for the RAM and processor, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting 6GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 6 Gen 1 processor. With the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, we're getting 8GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 695 5G processor. Now when it comes to performance, on one hand for basic activities that people are typically doing with smartphones nowadays, stuff like web browsing, social media, streaming content like videos and music, and maybe some light mobile gaming, either phone will definitely get the job done. And for mid-range phones, both phones here are decently fast. That being said though, between the two, I would say the Moto G Stylus 5G is quite a bit faster. Not exactly on a completely different level, but overall when you're using the phones for your daily activities, there definitely is a difference. If you're going to be on your phone a bit more, then I would definitely go with the Moto G Stylus 5G because, again, the performance on this phone is significantly better. It does have a much newer processor. In fact, I think it's the first phone to ever use this processor, whereas with the OnePlus Nord N30 5G, I've seen the Snapdragon 695 on a few different phones, and despite it definitely not being bad, it still has pretty average performance for a mid-range phone. So in general, again, if performance is a bit more important to you, the Moto G Stylus 5G will have an advantage. Now to give you an idea of what this difference looks like, I ran a benchmark test on each phone using Geekbench 6, and here are the results I got. So again, as you can see here, the Motorola clearly has an advantage. Again, it's really not like the difference between a mid-range phone and a flagship phone, but at the same time, the difference is still there. So definitely, if you do want the faster phone between the two, you will want to go with the Moto G Stylus 5G. But for the average user, the OnePlus Nord N30 5G will still be perfectly fine, and for most people, it definitely will get the job done. Now for the batteries, both phones have 5,000 mAh batteries, so definitely great there. If you're looking for a phone that has really good battery life, you're not going to go wrong with either. But when it comes to charging, the OnePlus Nord N30 5G has a huge advantage with 50-watt fast charging versus 20-watt fast charging with the Moto G Stylus 5G. Now whether or not this actually really makes a difference depends on how you're using your phone, because on one hand, for me personally, I usually have my phone plugged in 90% of the time anyway. So of course, in that kind of situation, if you're using your phone like that, you might not even notice the charging speed at all. But if you're in a situation where you're not always around a charger a whole lot, and you really want something that charges all the way up really fast, then of course in that case, the OnePlus will have a huge advantage. But also keep in mind, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, 20-watt fast charging is still definitely not terrible. So in general, if you're not really that concerned about charging speed, then it still will probably be okay. For the software, both phones do have Android 13, so definitely great to see. And both Motorola and OnePlus have at least decent software support, so at some point after Android 14 comes out, I'm expecting both phones to eventually get the update. And in addition to this, both phones have NFC, so if you like to use tap and pay, you can use it with either phone no problem. But of course, as the name implies, with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this phone obviously does have a stylus, so definitely a great feature to have. In fact, at this point in 2023, if you want a phone that has a stylus that's not the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra, there really aren't a ton of options. But I will say the stylus on this phone, despite not being amazing, is definitely good. In fact, I feel like it's a little bit better than the previous generation, which when it comes to Motorola, I'm not really that surprised. They are pretty good at improving their styluses at least. So for more basic activities like handwritten notes, navigating, maybe playing a game or something like that, it definitely will get the job done. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, despite them being pretty close, and really neither phone being a bad option, I would personally go with the Moto G Stylus 5G. With this phone, the performance is noticeably faster, it has a better camera setup that despite having pretty similar photo quality, the features are a bit better, and it can record 4K videos, which in my opinion, is definitely a really nice option to have. In addition to this, for the factory unlocked version at least, it does have quite a bit more storage at 256GB versus only 128 with the OnePlus. And it does have a stylus too, which again, at this point in 2023, when it comes to mid-range phones, this is definitely not a feature you see every day. That being said though, again, the OnePlus Nord N30 5G is definitely not a bad option at all. And if you're looking for a phone that has a slightly larger display, and maybe you want a phone with really good fast charging, the Nord N30 5G might be a better choice for you. But at the end of the day, if you're looking for an affordable 5G phone that has a really nice display, great performance, a really good camera, the latest software, and essential features like NFC, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone here. Now once again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, definitely check out the description, where I am linking to several other videos about them, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Calibus Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.